Hey guys, Dr. Ben here with Dr. Jake, and we're excited to talk today about intermittent fasting. Everyone's heard about it. You've probably even tried it, and either you felt great and you lost weight, or you felt horrible and you're like, I'm never doing that again. But even for some of you that did lose weight, was that ultimately the right thing to do? And so that is, pull this one out here. That is going to be, a huge part of this puzzle is it right for you? Because this is not the right thing for everybody. It's not going to be the fix it for all issues, or everybody needs to be intermittent fasting. Even you go back to, they're like, oh, well, in Paleolithic days, or, 1,000 years ago, did everybody intermittent fast?
Well, yeah, I mean, exactly that. That's the whole thing. Is the hunter-gatherer thing is you didn't just have a fridge ready full of food. You had to go and prepare it and wake up and get it going. And you can argue that both ways. I mean, you can wake up, you can basically say wake up, and the reason you have a cortisol response, and I guess we can get into some of this real quick, is a lot of patients, they'll come in and they'll be like, my cortisol goes way high in the morning, and then I eat breakfast and it drops down. What the heck is up with that? And that's actually, you have a pathway called gluconeogenesis, which is your body's ability to make glucose out of other products, primarily your glycogen stores and fats and things like that. But the whole purpose of that is if you have a healthy, what's called cortisol awakening response. It's a really, really important response for you to have. Cortisol is supposed to wake you up in the morning.
It's basically your get up and go.
Yeah.
So cortisol is the, hey, you know what? Life's going to happen to us, so we better be ready to take on whatever that is.
Go and hunt or find your food. So what I tell people, you're healthy when you wake up readily, like you wake up ready to go. You have a bowel movement within the first 30 minutes to clear yourself out and everything you've been kind of packing through the night. And then you are hungry. Like, that means that your neurology and your endocrine system, you are ready to get up and get going and find food. So that's one of the reasons where we've had a lot of people come in and they're just like, oh, breakfast makes me sick. It doesn't make me feel good, things like that. Those are the first people where I say, okay, intermittent fasting is not your deal.
So write that down. If you do not feel like eating first thing in the morning, and there's a lot of you out there, and you're the ones that end up going, well, I'm intermittent fasting, because especially if you've had teenagers, that's the ultimate, a lot of teens or college kids intermittent fast just naturally because they don't feel good, they don't feel like eating, their adrenals are out of balance, their cortisol rhythm's out of balance, and so they're not ready to get up and go. And so then they're like, well, this new fad thing, I'm just going to call it intermittent fasting and not eat until lunch like I normally do. But that's actually the problem. And what does that do?
So what it winds up doing, it causes you to become what we call a cortisol flatliner, which means because essentially what happens, if you actually track a cortisol curve throughout the day, if you do like 8 or 12 samples, you should see cortisol starts at a certain level. It kind of varies with certain people. Within a half an hour, it spikes up to 7 to 12 times your resting level. Really spikes you up, that stress hormone gets you going. And then within an hour, that should be cut in half. And then it slowly goes down throughout the entire day until you've been awake for about 15 hours. And then at about 15 hours-ish, you should have a drop, like a significant drop in that cortisol production. That triggers the brain, a little area called the hypothalamus, to trigger your pituitary to tell your pituitary to stop signaling down to the body and start signaling back and producing melatonin, which is going to start help regulating your sleep cycle. So it's called the HPA axis turn on at night. And then at night, that regulates your sleep rhythms. And then in the morning, cortisol should spike again, and you should have this normal pattern. It's called a diurnal pattern. If you're a cortisol flatliner, that doesn't happen. That means you're producing a low level of cortisol almost all day because your body's scared your blood sugar is going to drop too low. So the brain stimulates the adrenals to stimulate glycogen as well as cortisol. Glycogen is going to break down glucagon, which is a long chain of sugars, or it's going to turn fats into glucose, which is called gluconeogenesis. So you're going to be producing that all day and night just so you can try and stabilize the lower end of your blood sugar. And you become a cortisol flatliner. And then these people I get my second wind, or I can't get into a deep sleep, or my head just kind of turns. That's because you're not having that cortisol drop off. and that melatonin and that brain chemistry.
You get that second win, and that's what so many moms out there, so many people, they put the kids to bed, they got the laundry, and they're doing dishes and all these things, and you get this second win, and you're like, oh, this is good. I'm a night owl. So if you're a night owl, that means you're not a morning person, which means you're not a cortisol producing person in the morning, which means you're not a melatonin producing person at night, which means your body's not repairing like it needs to. And so some of what we're looking at, a lot of people that are waking up not able to get their oomph going, they have to have their coffee, they got to have their get up and go, whatever they're doing. It is because that cortisol is out of balance. And so somebody like this already probably has a blood sugar issue. They've already got a hypoglycemia state. That's a low blood sugar state going on.
Or a swinging state.
Oh, yeah, they're bouncing. That's what we see.
Yep, we see that all the time.
Even more than just low. We use continuous glucose monitoring to be able to see where people are at in that cycle, and we'll see people 80, 100 point swings in one day, where we want 20 to 25 point swings all day long. So here's the really important part. If your blood sugar is swinging all over the place, or if you're hypoglycemic, intermittent fasting probably is not for you, especially the early intermittent fasting. So breakfast, there's actually two types of intermittent fasting. What's the other type that we look at?
Well, there's actually a lot of types we start to look at.
Let's say the breakfast versus the dinner.
The breakfast versus the dinner. Most people default to I'll eat lunch and dinner, I'll eat later, and I'll eat within that 8-hour window and then fast for 16. That can be okay if you're the type of person that tends to be more overweight, let's do this. When should you do this? If you sleep well, your head hits the pillow and you can just knock out. You're a really quick riser. You wake up, you're ready to work out, get going in the morning, and you have that natural kind of response.
But maybe pre-diabetic or
overweight, exactly,
just that you need that you've got some extra glucose to actually burn off.
Because some people will, because they can actually become moderately insulin resistant. Because insulin resistance happens over time. If you're creeping into that insulin resistant stage, then it's a great thing because you don't have enough insulin to drop it down. So you need to teach your body what are called GD4 receptors that sit on your muscle cells. Their job is to bring glucose into the cell. And so if you have a really strong GD4 response, which is working out, exercising, getting going, they can actually help bring glucose into the cell without the need of insulin. So if you tend to have a higher blood sugar and slightly insulin resistant, those people tend to do really, really well. I would still personally recommend getting into a better pattern of the morning lunch and skipping kind of dinner, because there's also some major neurologic
and that's Dr. Bredesen. He wrote, if you haven't seen this book yet or read this book, go get it. It's there are a few of the chapters are a little technical, but it is really, really good. Dr. Bredesen, The End of Alzheimer's. If you have family history of that, if you have loved ones that are dealing with Alzheimer's, worried about it, want to prevent it, it's a great book, lots of action items in there. But in there, he talks about the importance, so you want to get into some basics on the neurology, kind of that cleaning that happens at night.
Yeah, and that's actually a huge part, because what I tell a lot of my patients is between 9 and 1 o'clock-ish, and the studies vary on this, of course, your brain needs about a 2.5-hour window to shut down and say, okay, I'm good. Well, the problem is if your brain's trying to coordinate the digestive response, the immune response, assimilating food, absorbing what it needs to.
You're watching Netflix.
Or you're stimulating with all those blue waves and rapid eye movements, and you're like, oh, I'm a night owl. You skip that vital area where the brain needs to fall asleep. Between about 9 and 1, you need about a 2.5-ish hour window there. The problem also is, coming back to tie the brain and neurology together, when the brain comes back on after it's had its rest, the next organ or system that's supposed to take its rest and go into kind of a self-care phase is your liver, between 1 and 3. And the most common time for people to wake up between 1 and 3, it doesn't just have to do with 1 REM cycle and 2 REM cycles, between 1 and 3, because if your brain kicks on and realizes, okay, I'm not in a good balance, I don't have enough blood sugar to make it through the rest of the night, then it shuts that melatonin production off, stimulates the cortisol production and the glycogen production, and then all of a sudden you're now stimulated.
And your brain, I've got a lot on my mind. You're like, welcome to America, right? Or wherever you are in the world, we've all got a lot on our mind. We've got jobs and cars and kids and COVID and presidents and Ukraine and whatever somebody wants to stress about. We've got that potential, but I slept through the night last night. Yeah, my liver didn't tell me, oh my gosh, time to wake up 3 o'clock in the morning. We got this liver issue going on. My melatonin rhythm didn't get out of balance. My cortisol didn't spike. All of those things. There have been times that happens, and occasionally, it is a stress response, and you do just have a lot on your plate, and it's just life's overwhelming. But that's also usually the time when my blood sugar is not as stabilized as it should be. And so here's the 2 main types of intermittent fasting that you can do. You can do the skip breakfast, eat from like 12 to 6, let's call it a 6-hour window. Or you eat from 7, 8 o'clock when you have breakfast, eat until maybe 3, and then you're done. What about for somebody that's like, man, could I have a little snack at 5? Would that still count, or is it pretty much nothing?
So the snacking is fine. I would actually do it closer to within about 45 minutes to an hour of bedtime. And that's when we actually work with a lot of patients saying, look, get a really simple protein fatty snack. And my favorite one, I tell a lot of my patients, my base level one is get a stick of celery and get some almond butter, something like that, and just chomp down 1 stick with some almond butter, because protein burns at about a 4-hour rate. And then fat will burn at a 6 to 8 hour rate. And then you get a quick little kind of carb and water hit from the celery and fibers. And that can carry you through the night. So if you notice, hey, I'm trying to start doing this intermittent fasting, but man, I just wake up hungry in the middle of the night, or I just get that cortisol stimulation, then definitely a snack is okay. But yes, if the goal is to do an intermittent fast, then you do want to try and break that as much. Keep that window as much as possible.
What about for people that work out in the morning? That are like, hey, you know what? I get up and I work out. So eat before working out, eat after working out. What are the thoughts there?
So this is where you do have to judge your body, because there's 2 different thoughts. So, and this is where I think it's great to have the glucose monitor, because it will tell you exactly what you're doing. Some people, you can work out, you have a really good cortisol awakening response, you produce a lot of glucose in your bloodstream. Those people, you really don't have to eat before you work out.
Or maybe some amino acids.
Maybe some simple, like a little protein clarified type shake.
Yeah,
that's
maybe some bone broth, or
exactly.
If you're okay with dairy, a little whey protein, whatever it is, and have a little bit before that. But if your blood sugar, and if that's what he was talking about, checking your blood sugar, if it's dropping during that workout, then you definitely need to do a little bit more food beforehand. But if you can sustain it and you're okay, and then you eat your breakfast, but make it a pretty good, especially if you're working out first thing, make it a pretty good breakfast. What would that look like? What could people do for a breakfast?
So my favorite one is I will chop up like 4 or 5 different veggies. So I will do like a sweet potato, kale, leek, some cabbage, and maybe some beet or carrot, or I just switch it up. I try and do about 5 different veggies, have a good thing. I pour
cup.
Oh, I do like 3 cups. I eat a lot. But yeah, you don't have to do a ton. But then I'll just put that in a pan. I'll put about probably a tablespoon or 2 of avocado oil in it. And then sometimes you can do, once those cook and kind of saute for about 10, 15 minutes, just to where they get a little bit soft, I'll either add an egg or 2 or some breakfast sausage. And then really, just because vegetables actually do have a good taste if you're buying high quality vegetables, maybe a little bit of salt and pepper, but you don't need a whole lot.
Yeah.
And that is a substantial breakfast. You're getting your carbs, your fibers, a really good fat, and a good protein source.
And if you're a sweater, or if it's hot and you're working out and you're sweating a lot, then you definitely could put some, especially the Celtic sea salt.
Exactly.
That's our favorite kind on there.
Yeah, we use that all the time.
Cheapest electrolyte out there, and a good a good half teaspoon. If you just had a really good workout on there. So doing that, and then you could for me, I drink on some protein throughout the morning. It's we've got a detox powder that we use that has collagen combined with some bone broth. I'll drink on that throughout the morning, and then have a good sized lunch. And then if there's a little bit of that left, and then then you could be done for the day. And it's a weird thing because people are used to coming home and sitting down, having this big dinner, the big lasagna or whatever it is. But if you look around the world, when do people mostly have their largest meal?
It should be breakfast, yeah.
Yeah, or even
the lunch, the afternoon.
Yeah, I mean, actually, lunch is definitely bigger than dinner.
Oh, 100%,
most places. Yeah. And so dinner, they might snack on a little. In France, maybe a glass of wine and some cheese or something. But it's a little bit at dinner time. But for a lot of places, and just how we've evolved over the last thousands of years, especially in the northern hemisphere, where you're working out in the field or doing those things in the winter, you don't have a lot to do. And so, you don't have a lot of food on hand. And so when the sun go down, well, I used to live in Alaska, that's a whole other place up there. But let's say you're in South Dakota or you're in Massachusetts, the sun's going down at 4:30 in the afternoon or evening. And people didn't used to stay up until 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
You burn through all of your firewood, you burn through all of your oil, and for your lanterns and whatever your candles, whatever you're using. So they basically were like, hey, we're going to go to bed and we're going to conserve energy, and we're not going to eat later in the day. But in the morning, hey, we're gonna get up, we're gonna have to go chop some wood, go do some things around. But then once nighttime hits, so definitely half the year. This is a good part. But then again, up in Alaska, the sun's up till midnight in the summer, and so that's a whole other thing. Like, who's going to bed at 9 o'clock? Does anybody?
You get really good at blocking out the sun.
You go to bed like that. So what we look at is for a lot of people that actually the nighttime, the afternoon, evening intermittent fasting is a more efficient for their body. It's not necessarily the easiest, and a lot of people, they actually feel hungrier at that time. But again, that's because that cortisol rhythm is out of balance. So if you are not feeling like eating in the morning, what's a good trick for the people that are like, man, but I just wake up and I do not feel like eating breakfast?
So we teach a lot of people what we call the morning car. You can actually jumpstart it with behavior and a little routine. And then there are a few things where we can actually help kind of stimulate that response hormonally wise. But that's what I tell people. It's actually a simple routine. You force yourself out of bed and you do 5 minutes of like push-ups. Just try and put your body,
jumping jacks.
Put your body into a state of, oh dang it, I've got to get going. I've got to get blood moving, and that triggers the brain. The brain's like, oh darn it, I'm short. I've got to produce a cortisol response. You can actually do a lot of this reset behaviorally. And that's really where I start with people before we load them onto anything. Look, just try and stimulate it by what you do.
And then in the evening, it's vice versa.
Exact opposite,
and so we've got tons of videos on here about sleep hygiene. You've got to prepare your brain and your body for sleep. And if you're sitting there looking at your iPad or watching Netflix, going through your 20 episodes, whatever it is, you're not preparing your brain. So that when you turn off the lights, when you do your curtains and whatever you're doing to get yourself to sleep, and you lie there, you're like, well, I can't get to sleep. I might as well get up and do the laundry or whatever. You've got to prepare yourself for sleep and prepare yourself for the day as well, and jumpstart that car. So this is such an important part, and we'll keep talking about this because so many people are confused and they're like, man, I just do not feel good. I read all these things and they're like intermittent fasting and it's going to help me live longer and prevent Alzheimer's, all these things. But actually, go read Dr. Bredesen's book, and he prefers, even if you've got APOE4, which I do, 25% of the population have the Alzheimer's gene, it should even be a longer fasting window around bedtime to give that brain a chance to heal and give it a chance to really repair these damaged areas and clean out that brain. So if you guys have any questions at all, pop those down below. We'll be doing more lives on this. It's a really, really important topic and a big part of getting your health back. So thanks for jumping on, everybody. Have a great day.